What is up, guys? It is Quinn here, back with another video, and today we're going to be jumping into a Fantasy Pros mock draft. So it's going to be a 12-team league, PPR scoring. We're drafting from the 5th overall spot, and then the roster setup is going to be 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, a tight end, and then 1 flex spot, and then 6 bench slots. If you guys enjoy the content, do me a huge favor, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. But let's just jump right into the draft. All right, so the first 4 picks off the board were all running backs. We saw CMC go at the 101, then JT, Eckler, and Najee Harris. I don't think this is like a wildly unrealistic start. I don't think you're going to see Najee Harris go this high in many drafts. I also think you're going to see either Jefferson or Kupp go in the top 4 or 5. If not both of those guys are going there. But right now, that means we're going to have our pick of the wide receiver 1. I'd be comfortable taking Cooper Kupp and Justin Jefferson in the first 3 picks. So here at number 5, I think both of these guys are values. I think you really can't go wrong with either player. Like, you could look at running back here, but for me, my top 4 is CMC, Jonathan Taylor, Jefferson, and Kupp. So we will be looking at the wide receiver position. Before Matthew Stafford had the concerns about his elbow, I did slightly favor Kupp over Jefferson, but Jefferson was like a very, very close second. So now that there is just a little bit of concern regarding Stafford's elbow, I just think it's enough to bump up Jefferson just a little bit ahead of Cooper Kupp. I don't think you could go wrong with either player, but Justin Jefferson is going to be the pick here. I just feel like he's set up to have an absolutely nuclear season. Dominant in his first 2 seasons in the NFL. This is likely going to be a more pass-heavy offense, so I think he's a really strong pick at this spot. Now, looking at our second-round pick, we saw a solid mix of running backs and wide receivers go in the back end of the first, and then the first half of the second round. We also saw Travis Kelce thrown in there, and then Josh Allen at the 206 is absolutely wild, but you'll probably see it in more casual leagues. So here at the 208, we can go in a variety of different spots. There's going to be Mark Andrews available. We're going to have some solid running backs, some solid wide receivers. So let's take a look at what we're looking at here. I think Mark Andrews, this is a little too early to pick him. I think this pick is likely going to be between Leonard Fournette and CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb's a guy I'm probably not going to have a ton of shares of, but here at the 20 overall spot, I honestly think it's a fair price. Leonard Fournette I've taken in a lot of these mock drafts, so maybe we switch it up a little bit. We go with CeeDee Lamb in the second round. I think mid-second round is totally appropriate for a guy like CeeDee Lamb. I wasn't huge on him earlier on in the offseason, but at this point, like the injuries to James Washington, you have Michael Gallup not going to be ready for week 1. Like, CeeDee Lamb is going to be dominant this year. He really just doesn't have a choice. So we're going to go with CeeDee Lamb. We can start 3 wide receivers and 1 flex, so we can have 4 wide receivers starting, and then hopefully we get a decent running back to fall to us in the 3rd round. But starting off with Jefferson and then CeeDee Lamb, I just think that's a really solid start to drafts. So let's take a look who went off the board. Once again, a solid mix of wide receivers and running backs. We saw Tyreek Hill and Mike Evans go in the second. Nick Chubb and Fournette wrapped up the second round. And then to start off the 3rd, it was Mark Andrews, Keenan Allen, Javonte Williams, and then DJ Moore. So now it's our pick here at the 305. From what I've seen, this is going to be a solid pick, either running back or wide receiver. Maybe you could argue Kyle Pitts here, but for me, I really like T. Higgins. I like A.J. Brown. I like James Conner at this price, so those are going to be the players I'm choosing between. And just looking at our roster setup here, we already have 2 wide receivers. I'm not sure if we're going to get a solid running back to fall to us in the 4th round. Like, if ETN or Hall doesn't make it there, I feel like we're going to be really short on that position. So even though I have James Conner and T. Higgins very close in my rankings, I'm going to favor James Conner here just because we need a running back to slot in. So he's going to be our 3rd round pick. Starting off a draft with Jefferson, Lamb, and then James Conner. I really like how this is playing out so far. And then let's take a look at how the 3rd and 4th rounds played out. We saw a decent amount of wide receivers go off the board at this spot, a few running backs, a couple of quarterbacks, Mahomes and Justin Herbert, and then tight ends Kyle Pitts and George Kittle. So that leads us into our 408 pick. Let's take a look at all the positions. Probably going to be fading tight end here just because I don't want to take Darren Waller in the mid 4th round, and he's really the only player that would be available here. Same thing for quarterback, not trying to draft a QB in the 4th round. At running back, Travis Etienne still being available is really solid value at the wide receiver position. Same thing with Jalen Waddle. I think Terry McLaurin is a solid pick also. But at this point, just looking at the running back position, I think there's a big fall off from Travis Etienne. to the rest of these guys. Whereas at the wide receiver position, I'm very confident we're going to have a solid player fall to us in the 5th round. So ETN is going to be the pick here. Slot in as our running back 2. I think he's going to have a really nice year with the Jaguars. He has that unknown workload of being like not a first year running back because he was injured all year last year, but the first time we actually see him on the field, we know he's a great pass catcher paired with his college quarterback. I think he's going to have a big year this season. So starting off, we have 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers. Let's see who we're choosing between in the 5th round. Basically, we just saw a ton of wide receivers go off the board after ETN. It was Montgomery, and then McLaurin, Metcalf, Waddle, Mike Williams, Hopkins, Mooney, and then Marquise Brown. Hopefully some solid wide receivers are still available. And actually, it seems like Darren Waller is available. So I think he's someone who is also in play at this price. Running back, Gibson, Dobbins, Josh Jacobs, not interested in the 5th round. Still probably going to be passing on the quarterback position. Looking at wide receiver, Amari Cooper, Jerry Jeudy, Mike Thomas, Rashad Bateman. I'd probably be looking at Rashad Bateman at this price, maybe a Jerry Jeudy, but I really feel like the value here is lying with Darren Waller. If you're getting Waller in the 5th round, that's where I'm comfortable taking him. So he is going to be the pick here. Even though he may not have the ceiling he's had in years past, I think this Raiders offense is going to be really strong, led by Derek Carr. You have Devontae Adams there. The pass catchers are very solid. They're going to have to keep up with all the elite offenses in their division, the Chargers, the Chiefs, the Broncos. They're going to be in some shootouts. So I do like Darren Waller in the 5th round, and he is going to be added into our starting lineup. Throughout the rest of the 5th round, we saw a solid mix of wide receivers and running backs come off the board. And then in the 6th round, we saw a bunch of wide receivers, 1 quarterback, 1 running back, and 1 tight end. So that leads us into the 608 spot. It looks like there's going to be some decent value at quarterback because only Lamar Jackson went off the board in between those picks. So Kyler is still available. Jalen Hurts is still available. Running backs, A.J. Dillon would be the only guy here I'd consider, but just not interested right now, especially looking at the other players on the board. Wide receiver, Amon-Ra, Juju, Elijah Moore. These are players that I'm comfortable taking at this price, but I just don't know if I'm going to be passing up on Kyler Murray here. I do think hypothetically I could take a guy like Juju, and maybe we see Jalen Hurts fall to us with our next pick, but I just don't know if I want to wait that long. This is actually a pretty tough call. Let's take a look at the other teams to see if they've already drafted quarterbacks ahead of us. So none of these teams have drafted quarterbacks. So it seems very likely that Kyler is going to go off the board. But also with this roster setup where we can start 4 wide receivers, I don't really want my wide receiver position to be lacking. We already have an elite tight end option, so I don't feel as desperate to get an elite quarterback. And I do think the wide receiver position could fall off. So I'm actually going to go with Juju here. I think he's a little bit undervalued on Fantasy Pros. He's not even someone I'm super in on sites like Underdog or even other ADP, fantasy football platforms. But I think in the 6th round, 68th overall, he's a guy I'm interested in at this price. Potential wide receiver 1 for the Chiefs. We know that is a very, very valuable role. And now let's jump back to the draft board. Hopefully a quarterback fall to us. It looks like we did see 3 quarterbacks come off the board, but it was Burrow, Kyler, and Tom Brady. So if I'm not mistaken, Jalen Hurts is still going to be on the board here. If you're getting Jalen Hurts late 6th round or 7th round or later, you're just getting an absolute steal. This is also a spot where I'd be comfortable taking Amon-Ra, Elijah Moore, Devonta Smith, but Jalen Hurts I think is going to outweigh all of those guys, especially because we do have 3 solid wide receivers. So Jalen Hurts is going to be the guy. I think the fall off between Jalen Hurts, guys like Russell Wilson, Dak Prescott is pretty solid. He has A.J. Brown coming into the offense. We know he has that elite rushing upside, so he's going to slot in as our quarterback 1. At the end of the 7th round and then start of the 8th round, we saw a decent amount of wide receivers come off. Also some quarterbacks, Russ, Prescott, Lance, and then a few running backs in Edmonds, CEH, and Melvin Gordon. So now at the 808, we're going to be looking at potentially wide receiver, potentially running back. We're locked in on quarterback, and we're locked in on tight end. So let's see what these other positions have to offer here. Looking at the running back position, we've got guys like Miles Sanders available, Kareem Hunt, Tony Pollard. I think the running back position honestly is looking a little bit stronger than the wide receiver position at the spot. Claypool's decent, Gage is decent, Olave's decent, but a guy like Miles Sanders, I'm not even super in on him as a player this year, But I mean, 92nd overall, 8th round, that's a price where I'm willing to kind of buy in on Miles Sanders. So if he slots in as our running back 3, I think that's a solid value for Miles Sanders. There's just not really any of these wide receivers that I like love in comparison to him. So getting our running back 3, he could be our flex, or maybe, he slots in as our top bench slot. Either way, Miles Sanders is going to be the pick here. Now, I would like to stack up on some more wide receivers because we do only have 3. Probably want a few more kind of in the arsenal here, especially because you would, prefer to start 4 wide receivers. But at this point, we've got an elite quarterback, elite running back. So I do understand that position is going to be a little bit weaker. Looking at the players who went off the board at the end of the 8th, start of the 9th, some running backs, Hunt, Harris, Penny, Pollard, some wide receivers, Claypool, Gage, and Gallup, and then Matthew Stafford thrown in there. So here at the 905, let's take a look at who is on the board. Right now, we have our full starting lineup filled out. 3 wide receivers, 3 running backs. Looking at the running back position, Devin Singletary is solid. Patterson is solid. Ramondre is solid. But I think we want to go wide receiver here. It's probably going to be between Chris Olave and Sky Moore. I know I've taken Sky Moore in a ton of these mock drafts, so let's go with Chris Olave with this pick. Think he can have a solid role from day one. Pretty NFL ready as a prospect. I think the Saints offense is actually going to be pretty solid this year. I talked about Jameis Winston as a quarterback sleeper. I think as a whole, this offense is going to be much better, much more pass heavy than last season. So he's someone I'm definitely willing to buy into. It seems like, the quality of players may have kind of thinned out at this point in the draft. Saw a heavy mix of wide receivers and running backs in the 9th and 10th round go off the board. So at the 10:08, let's kind of take a look at where the value is. At this point, for the rest of the draft, we're basically just locking in on wide receiver and running back with an elite quarterback and an elite tight end. Unless there's some crazy value, I'm not going to be super interested on getting a backup for either of those positions. So looking at the running backs and wide receivers who are available here, I do kind of feel like the value lies with the running backs. Like wide receivers, Devonta Parker, Landry, Rondell Moore, Galladay, MVS. Like, I don't really want to be taking these players in the 10th round. The guy that I normally go to at this spot, Julio Jones, is already off the board. So I feel like we're just going to wait on the wide receiver position, attack the running back spot. I think in PPR scoring, Hines is a fine pick, like Madison as a handcuff, or just like an upside play if Dalvin Cook goes down. I think Henderson is solid. McKissick is all right. Kenneth Gainwell is decent. Just a lot of solid running back options here. Even a guy like Rachaad White potentially. I think I'm going to go with Alexander Madison. There's still some uncertainty with these backfields. Like, is Rachaad White the clear handcuff? A little bit more confident in Isaiah Spiller. But Madison, like, we know if Dalvin Cook is not on the field, Alexander Madison is a top 12 running back. So that's how I'm going to be treating him, like a really high upside handcuff play. He's going to be our running back 4. Hopefully the wide receiver position has some better options here in round 11. And obviously there's not going to be better players available, but just in terms of like, maybe a ton of players didn't get picked. So let's see what went down. We saw a few wide receivers come off, mix of running backs, some tight ends thrown in there. With our 11th round pick, right now our team is looking like 4 running backs, 4 wide receivers, so we have an even split there. I'd probably prefer to get a few more wide receivers instead of loading up on running backs, but if the value is at the running back position, I'm just not going to shy away from it. Running backs, Hines is still here. Henderson is still here. Spiller, Rachaad White. So a lot of those guys I like are still on the board. Wide receiver, like none of these guys just seem like needle movers here. Galladay, Dotson, Robbie Anderson. The players I'd be interested would be like George Pickens, KJ Osborne, Christian Watson. And it seems like I can kind of wait on those guys, even like a guy like KJ Hamler, maybe even Wan'Dale Robinson. So I feel like I'm just going to go back to the well on the running back position and then probably just hammer out some wide receivers to finish out this draft. So now the question is, do we go with Henderson? Do we go with Spiller? I think in a lot of these drafts, I've picked players like Spiller and Rachaad White. So here I'm going to go with a guy like Darrell Henderson. I think he actually has some kind of maybe slept on upside. Like there's no guarantee Cam Akers is the same player. We've seen Sean McVay really want to give like a huge workload to a running back. So I think Cam Akers will have the opportunity from day one. But then I think like if he struggles, is banged up, Henderson could step in and be a real player for fantasy football. So he's going to be our running back 5. Honestly, probably the last running back we take here because I think as a whole, our running back unit is pretty solid. At the end of the 11th round and start of the 12th, we just saw a ton of running backs come off the board, so I feel pretty solid with picking Henderson. Kenny Golladay was the only wide receiver that was picked. We also saw some tight ends thrown in there, potentially tight end 2 options, or actually just finishing up as like those back end tight end 1s. So now is the spot where we go with the wide receiver position. We have 4 currently. I'm cool with ending this draft with 7 if we just fire off 3 straight. So the question is, which ones are we going to go after? I think Pickens is solid. Talked about it. Osborne, Watson. Let's just start off with George Pickens. Had a solid kind of debut in his preseason game. Was out there looking like a menace, but also like a very solid football player. So he's going to be the first pick here. Obviously, the quarterback situation isn't good, but at some point, like, talent's going to win out regardless. If he is a very good NFL player, he is still going to produce for fantasy football, even in like, a questionable quarterback situation. So it seems like the running backs are still coming off the board heavy. Also some tight ends, and then Jahan Dotson thrown in there. So in the 13th, attacking that wide receiver position again. Maybe we'll just take a look at quarterback. A-Rod's on the board. I really only would be considering a second quarterback if it was a guy like Trey Lance. Tight end. I mean, we could go with one of these guys, but I'm ready to just pound the wide receiver position. Nico Collins is potentially interesting. Jameson Williams, maybe. Osborne, Watson. You know what? Let's take a shot on Nico Collins. I feel like I haven't taken him in many drafts. Solid young player. We'll see if he can kind of step up, be the clear number 2 option. Let's take a look at his stats from last year. He was a rookie, 14 games, 446 receiving yards. Nothing crazy, but this was not a good offense. Maybe he takes a leap here in year 2. We'll give him a shot here as our wide receiver 6. And then let's just fire off our wide receiver 7. Don't really need to look at the draft board. Guys like Joshua Palmer, Marvin Jones, Osborne is still on the board, Hamler. Looking at our quarterback, Jalen Hurts, are there any like fun stacks here? Not really. Really with the Eagles, you probably just want to be owning like A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, and then I guess Dallas Goedert thrown in there. We do have the Hurts-Sanders stack. Looking at wide receiver, not interested in Anderson. Looks like Corey Davis is actually the wide receiver 2 now, but don't know how valuable that is, especially because Garrett Wilson is probably going to jump him in the long run. Let's take a stab on KJ Hamler, likely stepping up as the wide receiver 3 with Tim Patrick gone. He's coming off the ACL tear, but maybe he plays a role in this offense. Russell Wilson coming in, overall higher ceiling for these Broncos wide receivers. So he will wrap up this draft. I went out, took some flyers on some of these late round wide receivers that I normally aren't like super locked in on. This is our final grade. They give us an 82. We do not care about the grade at all because it just kind of lines up with how well you follow their ADP. Look at our starting lineup. Jalen Hurts, James Conner, Travis Etienne, Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, Juju Smith-Schuster, Darren Waller, and Miles Sanders. And then our bench, Chris Olave, Alexander Mattison, Darrell Henderson, George Pickens, Nico Collins, and KJ Hamler. Let me know what you guys think about this team down below in the comment section. Overall, I feel like it's pretty solid. We're dominant at the quarterback and tight end positions. Elite early round options there. I think our running backs are well rounded. We don't have a top 2 round guy, but I think Connor could qualify there. ETN is like a 3-4 turn option. Our top wide receivers are really strong. So I feel pretty solid with this draft. Thank you all for stopping by, and I'll see you in the next one.